Hi, good morning. Welcome to Chapter 8, Establishing a Constructive Climate. I actually really love this chapter. I think it's one of the most important aspects of effective leadership. If we're going to be positive agents for effective change in the world, then we need to know whether we're working with a group in our biology class or if we're leading a Fortune 500 company. We need to understand this very important aspect of being great leaders and having effective groups. So let's talk about it and get right into it. So Chapter 8, like I mentioned, is titled Establishing a Constructive Climate. And I think first we need to define what it is that we're talking about, right? When we say a constructive climate, think about the word constructive, right? Meaning that it's always in a state of flux. When something is constructive, it's in a state of flux, but it also implicates something else, right? It implicates that if it's constructive, that it's good, right? That it's positive, that it's ever changing for the positive direction. And so when we talk about defining, constructive climate, we want to discuss the idea that we need an atmosphere in our teams and organizations where we have a positive mood, right? That we have a positive feeling, that we have norms and values that lead to this kind of high morale within the group, whether, like I said, we're talking about something in our everyday lives right now, or we're talking about our professional selves in the future, right? And understanding that this group dynamic, this morale may be always fluctuating based on the situation and the circumstance that you are addressing, based on the individual's moods that day. Y'all know how your moods change day to day. Well, this can very much affect the group with which you are working in, whether it's a small group, 2 or 3 people, or whether it's a very large group. Okay, so let's talk about putting constructive climate into practice. And I want to first start out with this very important piece. And this is not included in your textbook, but I'm going to give you my 20 years of experience and tell you that the first thing any person, whether you are a leader because of title or authority, like in some sort of hierarchical situation, like your business or, a job you've been given or hired for, or if it's just you today, right? Stepping up, you're sitting on the bus and, somebody needs help getting their groceries off the bus and you decide to show up as a leader in that moment. No matter what it is, your first responsibility is to make people feel comfortable. And this is called creating community. Okay? So make sure that's in your notes. You first. If you're going to have a constructive climate with your team, you first need to create community, okay? Creating community means that you are setting the framework for people to feel comfortable, to be open, and to be willing to participate. And the reason why this is so important, you have experienced a million times. How many times have your teachers or professors put you into a group and everyone just sort of gets in their group, they're leaned back with their arms crossed, right? And there's maybe one person who's doing all the talking, right? And this feels uncomfortable and it doesn't feel productive. Usually it manages to get done. Maybe it gets done because you're that person who takes on the work. Maybe you got lucky and you got with a group of go-getters, but for the most part, we usually have this uncomfortableness, right, where people are not willing to participate. It doesn't feel safe to participate because you're a group of strangers. Creating community matters because at the initiation of whatever group comes together, the members need to first create community by, number 1, the basics. What's my name? Number 2, the nonverbal communication, a smile, the tone of voice, right? The nonverbal communication of how we're sitting. I mentioned, the person who's leaned back with their arms crossed. This communicates an inability or a lack of desire to want to be involved. We have to be open with our words and our deeds and our behaviors. So creating community is 1, what's my name? I'm happy to be here. I show that in my words and in my behavior. Then maybe we just, instead of getting right to whatever it is that we need to get done, we have an opportunity where we actually get to know each other. And maybe not in a perfunctory way, right? Not in the usual, where are you from? Checking off the list things, but actually really being interested in people. Oh, I saw that you have this on your backpack, a pin on your backpack. Did you go to that concert? Oh, I love them. Or I heard about them, but I don't know anything about them. What kind of music is that, right? Find a way for the people within the group to get to know each other and to find some common interests. Right? This is not easy. This requires emotional intelligence. This requires a willingness on your part to show up as that leader, right? Again, whether you're titled or not. Leadership is hard. but it is a people endeavor. So creating community first. So wherever you get in those groups, again, whether it's 2 people or 500 people, the first thing you need to do is create community, meaning a safe place. How do we do this? We do this by getting familiar with one another. So therefore, we feel open and willing to participate. So create community first. Make people feel comfortable. All right, so the book lists 4 things you need to create effective community, and that is number 1, structure. So you've got to define the roles, you've got to define the tasks, you've got to give people a way to get there, right? Now, remember, you're going to go about this in different ways depending on what your style is, whether you're, autocratic, democratic, laissez-faire, whether you're more task or relationship oriented. But if you've created community first, then when you get to those roles, you're not just going to dictate, right? You're going to take the strengths because you've gotten to know people when you create a community. You're going to take their strengths and you're going to ask them if they would like these roles, or you're going to come up together and maybe you're going to say, what would you like to do? Right? Or you're going to notice, hey, I really noticed you're really good at those drawings you had on the front of your folder there. Would you like to be responsible for the design aspect, right? As a leader, your job is to notice all of these ineffable things, right? The things you can't describe, but that you notice in people. Maybe someone is really good at speaking. Maybe someone has great handwriting, right? Even in that initial 5 minutes, if you haven't had time, there are things that you can note if you're a leader that will tell you a lot about people and how they will fit well within the group and how you can use each other's strengths, because that is what it is all about when it comes to leadership, is identifying the strengths within yourself and the strengths within others and then maximizing those, right? Okay, so number 1, structure. Remember how important the mission is when it comes to roles and tasks, right? Make sure that everybody is aware of what it is that you all are doing, what the vision and what the mission is, okay? Because then once people feel comfortable and you've created community and everybody has their roles and they have strategized how they're going to get their roles completed, then a synergy happens, right? Everybody's excited to be there. Everyone's excited to complete the task. And synergy is that beautiful thing of when people are working together in this harmonious way that makes the sum of everyone's work better, when we're all doing it with a common purpose, okay? The second thing the book talks about is clarifying norms. Norms is another word for values, right? So like kind of an unsaid and sometimes said list of rules that we go by as a group, right? You've heard of like some places, maybe you've gone to your doctor's office and then on Fridays they do casual Fridays. So you notice people are in jeans and t-shirts on Fridays. This is either a said or unsaid, right, norm within the organization. There's lots of different examples of this. Classrooms, for example, it's pretty understood that you shouldn't have a cell phone out while a professor is at the front of the room and lecturing, right? So these are norms that, again, can be explicit, meaning that they are verbalized, and sometimes they're implicit, meaning that they are just something that we know and understand. So we need to make sure we have our rules of behavior, our norms, shared by all of the members. Again, this happens when we create community. If you notice that someone is not participating, we have to, as leaders, it's our responsibility to draw them out. And I know it's tempting to go old school traditional leadership, which is like, well, if they don't want to participate, I don't want their help. But remember, as leaders, we believe in the shared strength of the group, meaning I don't know what that person has to offer this group, right? Until we tap into their strengths. And so our job is to help bring out the best in everyone. So number 2, clarifying norms. Number 3, building cohesiveness. This is an important word. Cohesiveness, the book defines as a we-ness, meaning the togetherness, right? The how well we're working as one, right? We're all made up, the group is made up of individuals, which is important. We're recognizing the individuals, but we're at the same time, as great leaders, we're recognizing the ability of the group. And when we talk about cohesiveness, we're talking about the we-ness of the group. How well are we working as one? Again, comes back to that creating community at the start, right? That sense of togetherness offers a lot, right? If we have community and we have cohesiveness, then we have safety for people to be able to openly confront anything that they are dealing with that they need to bring to the table, which is so important, right? When we have conflict, we need to address it. Leaders do not turn away from conflict, we turn toward it because we believe conflict is just an opportunity to understand one another better. Whether we're talking about our romantic relationships, familial relationships, roommate relationships, but even in a professional environment, right? That when we feel safe and we have cohesiveness and community, that we're able to give feedback and hear it from one another instead of taking it as criticism. And we're also most able to create innovation. Think about it. If people feel safe to talk about what their ideas are, then you're going to have more ideas. And the more pool of ideas you have, the bigger pool of ideas you have, the more innovative your group is going to be, right? And this is important when we think about technology, but when we think about anything, right? I mean, just you and your boyfriend or girlfriend sitting there on Friday night deciding where to go to dinner, right? If we feel safe to offer our opinion instead of being criticized for it, right? That it feels like a place where that is valued, then you're going to speak up and you're going to have a more harmonious group, right? Be careful when a group is working together. The only downside of that, just like anything that is working well, there's always a downside. And that is that we can lean into groupthink, meaning that if we're working really well together as one, or we're super cohesive, we can sometimes then fall into this pattern of always valuing the group over the individual. And sometimes we have to acknowledge when that can be dangerous, right? When we have groupthink, sometimes the group can work too harmoniously, meaning that we fall into this dangerous spot where we are not thinking outside the box anymore. We're staying within the group's kind of limitations. And if there's nobody, if the leader is not afraid to shake it up and go, no, we need to work harder. We need to have bigger ideas. You guys need to get innovative. You need to get, a little more adventurous, right? We can fall into like not pushing ourselves. And so be careful of that groupthink of everybody kind of thinking the same. Number 4, and lastly, the book talks about promoting standards of excellence, okay? Standards of excellence is basically the benchmarks for what we believe you should be able to achieve, okay? These should be clear. As a leader, we should say, remember we started out with number 1 with structure of what our roles and tasks would be. We need to be able to be clear about what that looks like, right? And this needs to be part of our standard performance, right? We need to be able to say, Krista Hellman, you're responsible for this and this and this, and this needs to be done by this date and needs to be this clear and it needs to be this effective, and you need to be able to show it to our client, and you need to be able to present it to the group first, and we need to be able to have time to revise it. We need to have these things clear and express them in a way, again, that makes people feel empowered, right? Empowered rather than nervous. This is important. Researchers LaFasto and Larson did a lot of work, a lot of research, and collected a lot of data in this field. And they believe that there's 3 things necessary for promoting high standards of excellence, right? If you want people to really push their boundaries and have high innovation and high standards of performance, they found that there's 3 R's. Number 1, that you need to define the results. So we just talked about this, right? Make it really clear what it is that they need to get done, when, and how. Coach them along the way, right? Don't criticize, coach. That's a big one for leaders. Number 2, the second R is review the results. So there needs to be an opportunity to have a review process. How did it go? Where can we improve? What went really, really well? And then number 3, and this is most important, and that is reward the results. It's in traditional leadership, we tend to forget this part. We focus so much on what hasn't happened rather than what has happened. And remember, we talked about positive psychology being the way to motivate people. The way to get the best results is to lead people with positivity, right? That doesn't mean that we don't have feedback. Okay, feedback is important. Look, this went really well. I love this, but let's work on building this. And then you coach them to improve, right? Rewarding results and finding opportunities where people are doing great is the number 1 job of a leader, right? Creating community, but also rewarding people when they're doing well. Finding places where they're doing really well. This is key and this is important. And this all comes together to help us create a constructive climate. But remember what I said, the first things first, you have to create community before you can have a constructive climate. Okay? All right, thanks for a great week. Keep pushing yourselves. Remember, use language that empowers you. Okay? Not I will try, not hopefully, but in these last few weeks, remember that you can and you will. You guys have got this. Let me know if you need me.